Hello, dear students. How are you? Today we will learn the techniques of induced breeding in fishes. Myself, K. Subhashini, Assistant Professor of Zoology. Today I am going to discuss you some techniques and involved in induced breeding, and it is an important question for your syllabus and your SEM exams too. And what is induced breeding, ma? Induce means it is nothing but stimulation. Inducing is an artificial thing, it's not natural, and it is stimulation, outer external stimulation given to the fish. That is induced breeding. Why this is being done? This induced breeding is done in aquaculture mainly with the species or like carps, mullets, milkfish and catfishes like chana and all. So to grow and expansion of aquaculture, this technique of induced breeding had been developed, and the stimulation is given by some external hormones or other synthetic hormones by providing some favorable conditions to induce or introduce to breed in captive condition. The stimulation promotes timely release of sperms and eggs from ripe glands. So, why? What is the need? Because of the environmental conditions and expansion of aquaculture and insufficient release of hormones in captive condition and insufficiency of natural foods, mainly the expansion of aquaculture. This technique of induced breeding is being introduced in aquaculture. While doing this induced breeding, what points we should remember? The main points we should remember are the brooders that we are selecting for this induced breeding. They must be healthy, fully ripe and medium sized also. And the dosage of hormones given to these brooders, it is to be calculated according to the given protocol, and it is to be injected very carefully without damaging its tissue. And in inducive breeding technique, it is responsible for augmenting the fish seed production in our country. There are more than 700 distinct commercial hatcheries in our country to produce carp seed through the induced breeding technique. These hatcheries adopt both traditional hypophysation and the recent based induced breeding technologies and new methods for seed production. So, what is the process involved in this induced breeding? The artificial process in which we are taking the extract of pituitary gland is introduced inside the body of the both matured and male and female fishes. Then what happens? After being excited, they lay eggs in the pond water and subsequently fertilization takes place, and this process of this induction is known as induced breeding of fishes. This process is also known as hypophysation. That is, hypophysation is the other name for induced breeding. Do you have any advantages with this? Yes, we have certain advantages. That is why we are doing this type of induced breeding in our aquaculture. What are they? Major cultured fish species. They do not naturally breed more in the confined waters, and the seed collected from the nature or mixed with other not much suitable unprofitable fish culture, and the seed fish may not be available on the times of requirement. Because of the capture, the seed fish, the grown ripe fish may not be available and their transportation from place of collection to the culture site may have some problems. So we should practice this hypophysation technique in our aquaculture. And when we see the history of this induced breeding, it is first developed by B.A. Hussey in 1930 in Brazil, and in India it has been done on Sirhinus prigala for the first time by Hamid Khan in 1937, and the latest technique is developed by Parameshwaran in 1962. And here in this slide you can see the history of induced breeding in India, and you can see what are the reasons behind the fish, why they are not breeding in captivity actively. What are they? Just now we have discussed that some photoperiods, rain, insufficient rain, temperatures, and currents of water influence the hormonal activity from pituitary and gonads, and disturbances arising from environment is also causing the insufficient release of hormones, and the seed fish that are ripe fish may not be available in the times of requirement. So we have to do this induced breeding, and it is necessary for effective aquaculture or fish culture. And what is the need? Here you can see it gives pure span of certain species of fish under cultivation. That means if you want one type, that is major carps, katla or rohu, whatever fish you want, for example chana, koraminu, that is very costly fish. If you want more span of certain type of fish, then you can use this type of induced breeding. And in culture pond, spotting of pure seed is quite impossible in those stages. So in later stages it is possible but time consuming, and it arises timely available of pure seed, whereas in nature the availability of seed is quite uncertain because of the unavailability of ripe fish. And when we use this induced breeding technique, it can fulfill any quantity of demand in any time. So it also cuts short the holding potential spanners over long periods in uncertain hope of the breeding in time. Many carps take their full maturity in confined water but do not breed. So this technique is very simple, and it does not need too much technical assistance of knowledge, and it can be easily learned by any layman without much training. The cost of expenditure is very low, as we are taking out just the pituitary gland and we are injecting to the ripe fish. So the cost is very low, and the natural collections of span is good. So we are practicing this type of induced breeding techniques in our fish culture. So let us see how this technique works and how this technique is being done. And this technique, the induced breeding technique, is mainly based on pituitary gland. Do you know what is pituitary gland? Where it is located? Pituitary gland is also it is having a part known as hypophysis. In human, you can see it is located in the ventral side of the brain, and it is very much protected also because it is known as master gland. I think you remember it in your earlier classes. You might have studied this pituitary gland very well, and it is known as master gland, stimulating other glands, other hormonal glands. And this gland in fishes is located at sella or sphenoid bone. It is so located at sphenoid bone, and it is in the ventral side of the brain, just behind the optic chiasma and below the hypophysis. Here you can see in this picture how it is being removed here. See here in this part here you can see the pituitary gland. So it can be removed from that part. So when you see how this pituitary is removed from the ripe or breeding uh, fish, what they are doing, foramina magnum is first exposed by removing vertebral parts and adhering to the skull. Then the fat is removed by means of forceps and then a cotton piece. The pair of forceps then inserted into foramina magnum dorsally to the brain, and anterior part of the brain now detached and remaining is carefully lifted out through the foramen magnum. Then the gland is then located and removed. And another type of removal is dissecting the head. In this technique, it is not used commercially because of the heads are damaged by this process. Normally, when fish sellers are selling the fishes, normally they detach the heads. You can collect all those heads by the way of smear collection, and you can have the pituitary glands from those heads. But normally it is not so commercially useful because the heads may be damaged at the pituitary, and the first head is dissected using the sharp butcher's knife. A portion of scalp is chopped off and clean cut with the stroke, and at the olfactory and optic nerves uh, the brain is lifted and removed. Then they locate the pituitary gland, and the gland may come up along with the brain, and they remain behind the floor of the brain cavity. And if any case the gland is carefully removed after separating it from membrane or the brain, the gland must not be damaged or torn. So normally the first method, that is removal from foramen magnum, is followed by the fisherman to collect the pituitary glands. You can see these type of instruments are used to break the skull of the fish carefully to take the pituitary gland without any damage. And you can see here from this part the pituitary is being collected, and it is the after collection these pituitary glands are preserved in alcohol or acetone. The first one is alcohol preservation. If the collected glands are immediately put in absolute alcohol for defatting and dehydration, then after 24 hours glands are washed with absolute alcohol and kept again in fresh. Then alcohol stored in refrigerator up to 2 to 3 years at room temperature up to 1 year. Then second type is acetone preservation. If alcohol is not there with us, then we can use the alternative acetone. These glands are kept in fresh acetone or in dry ice chilled acetone inside the refrigerator at minus 20 degrees Celsius for 36 to 48 hours only. 2 to 3 changes of acetone at about 8 to 12 hours intervals are to be done, and glands are taken out of acetone, then put on filter paper and dried at room temperature for 1 hour, and largely practiced. This type of acetone technique is largely practiced in USA and Russia. Then normally we use alcohol preservation only, that is effective, and you can store the glands for more time also. When we want to give an injection to the brooder fish, then we have to prepare the gland extract. Extractor of the gland prepared just before the injection. You should prepare the injection just before when you are performing that, and then only you should take out these pituitary glands from refrigeration. Then these glands should be weighed properly, and you should weigh them according to the weight of the ripened fish, and you should homogenize in distilled water or 0.3 saline water. Then the final volume should be 0.2 milliliters ml per kg body weight of the fish. Normally we have to take 4 to 5 kgs weight of the fish, ripe fish, and you should take the clear suspension, centrifuged suspension, and then you have to inject to the fish. And when we are selecting the brooders, they must be, we have already discussed this part, they must be very healthy enough and ripe. 2 to 4 years of age is generally selected, and 1 to 5 kg body weight is preferable, as they have to produce more number of ova. Then how the injection is given to the brooders, you can see here. Ripe fish is being given a pituitary gland injection. Have you ever seen this? When you visit an aquaculture farm, then you can see hatchery, you can see this type of injections being given to the fish. The pituitary extract is administered into the body of brooders by means of hypodermic syringe, that is a normal syringe, by either intramuscular or intraperitoneal. Then determination of correct dosage is very essential, and it is normally these injections are given at the base of pelvic fins or pectoral fins. You should remember that the injections normally they should be given below at the base of pelvic fin or pectoral fin, or also at caudal peduncle or shoulder regions near the dorsal fin. Then how the dosage should be? The female fish should be given 2 doses at the interval of 4 to 5 hours or 5 to 6 hours, and the initial dosage will be 2 to 3 milligrams per kg body weight, and the male should be given only 1 dose at the time of, and the second dose the female should be given 2 doses, and then these 2 brooder fishes are to be kept for spanning. After injection to the brooders, a set of brooders are released into a breeding happer. Happer means, you know, that a small chamber. You can see a happer here. Into these happers, this one a happer. So like this, 2 breeding fishes are released into this happer. Normally, at set of 2 female fishes and male fish, 1 male fish is considered as 1 set, and these are released into a breeding happer, and in this breeding happer the measurements are 3 into 1.5 into 1 meter for breeding, weighing up to 3 to 5 kgs, and the roof can be opened or closed also. The spanning takes place within 3 to 6 hours following the second dose. It turns into the midnight if the second injection was given in the evening, and successful induced breeding results in the span of fertilized eggs. These fertilized eggs are transparent and pearl-like, whereas unfertilized eggs are opaque and whitish. So in this breeding happers, both the breeding male and female fishes are kept, and you can after spanning, what happens, the ova, you can see many number of happers here in the hatcheries. In these happers, what happens, they span the ovum and the sperms will be released into these happers. Why these happers are to be built? The released ovum and sperm are very small in size, and they may be moved off for and the zygote formation may not take place. So to prevent this, they are building a small happers. So thereby the spanning will takes place at certain place, and ovums and sperms are available to each other, and zygote formation will be it will be happening compulsorily. So what are the factors influencing the spanning of fish? The climate is an important factor, and the temperature must be at 24 degrees to 31 degrees, and it should be somewhat cloudy, or it may be rainy in rainy season, and water should be flowing water is preferred, and the turbidity is 100 ppm to 1000 ppm, and light, it is also known to bring that light may help in early maturation and spanning of fish. So this is about induced breeding, and when the zygotes are grown up and when they will become uh, 3 to 5 centimeters large and to the size of a finger, then they will be shifted into the growing growing ponds. So is there any substitutes for these pituitary glands? So always collecting so many pituitary glands from different fishes and injecting to the ripe breeding fishes is somewhat difficult. So our scientists, what they did, they identified some artificial hormones, that is HCG, that is organon, and some hormones ovaprim, like hormones to induce this spanning instead of using this pituitary glands extracted from original fish. So among these, first is it is injected to Labio rohita, and the experiment was done on Labio rohita, and the spanning was very much successful. So do you know any synthetic hormones? So there are two types of synthetic hormones for fish spanning. They are ovaprim and ovatide. These may be used instead of collecting the pituitary glands from natural fishes. These synthetic hormones can be injected similar to the pituitary extract, and you can have the spanning very successfully. And here you can see some of the observations, and the rates of fertilizations and hatching were generally higher in ovaprim treatment when compared to the pituitary, as ovaprim is a synthetic hormone and it is very clear form also. You can see the observations in Katla, Rohu, Mrigal, carps, grass carps, and other fringe-linked carps, like that. The hatching is obtained from ovaprin treatment is appearing to be healthier than those that of the pituitary. So in our nowadays hatcheries, the fishermen and the hatchery owners, they are normally using such synthetic hormones, ovaprim and ovatide, for better fish induced breeding. So are there any this is a very useful and easy process, but it is also involving some problems. What are those things? What are the problems involved in this hypophysation technique or induced breeding? The farmer cannot measure the potency of the available gland. So serious difficulties in large scale collection and storage of pituitary. So special training must be given to the local farmers. Then the large gap between the supply and demand of pituitary. So the basic equipments, chemical balance, centrifuge, they are not available with the farmers. So pituitary gland is very costly. To resolve all these technical issues, what is there are synthetic hormones, ovaprim and ovatide are there. Normally in the fish farmers, they use ovaprim as the main component for to um, induce the breeding. So this is about all our induced breeding technique. And now we come to conclusion. So fish hatchery operators, they must be trained on better brooding fish management and hatchery management and nursery management to produce fish good quality. And the government of India should also take explore the possibility having uniform fish seed and having good quality um, fish for the people of India, and it is about the induced breeding technique. It is very important for you as it may come for 15 marks question in your end exams. And um, if you have any doubts, please ask me through a phone call or a message. I always advise you to write proper notes because it helps you in your exam preparation and getting good percentage. Thank you very much.